Welcome to Translation Confidential. All right, Peter, Patrick, we're here. We're talking AI today. But in a different way, I think. Yeah, Patrick? I mean, this is I think what we're talking about here is based on that Gartner survey, that article that you discovered. And I think it's an interesting headline. 80% of companies cut jobs for AI, but it didn't improve their returns. Interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're gonna obviously get into how that comes into the language services space, but that was super interesting headline that obviously grabbed my attention. Gartner, which is obviously the very respected analysis company, they surveyed enterprise companies, which they defined as $1 billion plus. They surveyed 350 of them, and that's kind of a wild stat that 80% of them have already made job cuts for AI, but the returns didn't move as a result of that.
Yeah, I mean, not even a little, right? So, I mean, if you run a language services company, or if you buy translation, or even in your space, Patrick, this is, I think, one of the most important data points we've heard in a while. And I think we're going to just have a bit of an open discussion on why this matters. And I mean, here's the stats on the study, right? So there were 350 enterprises, and they were all a billion plus. So these are not small companies, they're large companies. And they were all actively deploying AI agents, automation, RPA, digital twins. These are not tire kickers. These are serious users who have thought about implementation and how they rolled it out. And they did it at scale, right? So 80% of them reported workforce reductions tied to AI. We've talked on this podcast multiple times that really, is that a direct tie to AI, or did you just hire too many people, right? So that's a whole nother discussion. But some cut headcount by as much as 20%, right? There's been some really large ones in the news, obviously. And the finding was that companies that cut the most showed nearly identical financial returns to those that cut the least. And in several cases, the ones that cut less performed better. So, and I'm not sure I'm going to be able to pronounce this person's name, but I'm going to try, Patrick. Helen Potovan's key quote was framing this whole thing is that layoffs create budget room, right? Obviously, okay, you lay people off, you save money, but they don't create a return. That's two different things. And I think most leadership teams are conflating them. And I mean, I don't know, Patrick, to me, this is nothing new in business, right? Is that especially for companies that are publicly traded, there's a couple ways to perform or to kind of juice your earnings, but it's a one-time juicing your earnings. If you can't increase revenue, you cut your costs, you recognize that savings, and then it's like, okay, there it is.
Yeah, I mean, we'll get into this a bit later too, but I think a lot of them have seen too the need to rehire some of that talent that was let go.
Yeah, that's right.
And probably at a premium. I think we all know the stats of how much more expensive it is to hire someone new than to train up or promote someone from within. But yeah, I think like the C-suite's probably gonna have a rude awakening to see that like actual business performance didn't move. So if that's the goal of AI related layoffs, it seems like that was a big miss.
Absolutely. And I think the spending isn't slowing down, right? So AI agent software spending is projected at 206 billion this year, and that's up from 86 billion last year. And of course, we're all
so just like tripling.
Yeah, I mean, just a squishy little increase, nothing major, just 300%, all good. And we're all reading obviously about all the other investments that are accelerating in data centers, and because you have to have data centers to power all this stuff. So the question is, what do you do with your people while the technology catches up to the promises? And I think that's one of the major points here is, again, because there's so many things going on at once, and I'm going to lean into this, that you've got AI, you've got inflationary pressures, you've got obviously tariffs that are hurting most manufacturers, and now there was just some new news today about how that's impacting, everything from restaurants to food trucks to people buying grocery. I mean, obviously, right? No stranger to this. We understood this was coming. That wasn't going to be an immediate impact. By the way, when they unwind those things, it's not going to be an immediate relief either. We all know that. So I think all of those things play into what's going on. And, maybe all of this stuff in AI is just accelerating that or accentuating it, I guess. So
Yeah, I think too, like we've discussed before, I think we're seeing lots of large pendulum swings, and I think we'll settle somewhere in the middle on all of this when kind of the AI craze is said and done. But I think we wanted to get a little more specific of how this news affects the language industry. I think we've seen, those of us in the industry, if you're on LinkedIn at all, or connected to the community, that lots of translators are scared that they're like, oh crap, AI is here, it's going to take my job, I'm not going to have anything to do. So that sentiment of AI replacing people is very real in the language services space. I would say maybe more so on the linguist side of the equation than LSPs, but definitely want to pick your brain on that, Peter, as well, of like the sentiment you're seeing. Because I know we've also heard like, well, why do I need linguists if I've got MT or an AI trained engine to do the translations now?
Well, it's really interesting, Patrick. It's definitely a tale of two cities, because I think, like many things that we talk about in translation, we used to always talk about kind of where people are on the sort of translation maturity scale. I forget, Common Sense Advisory, or I can't remember, one of the other think tanks in our space came up with this idea that buyers are kind of in different places along the spectrum of how they understand translation, how they use tools, how they buy translations. I would say that AI kind of creates sort of another curve, right? Another curve of where they are in the scale. And people are in very different spots. Like, some people have gone all in and have tried stuff. And by the way, they don't always share with us this information, but you can kind of read between the lines, like, oh, you've been missing for a few months. Where have you gone? And then suddenly they're back, a little bit at a time. And, I sometimes I think it makes sense to ask. Sometimes, from a customer success approach, it's best not to ask. But we have definitely heard some stories, definitely seen a lot on LinkedIn as well, of folks that have tried an all AI approach, save money for a few quarters, and then something bad happens, right? Because that quality factor isn't important until it is, right? And suddenly they lose a client over a compliance issue, or a product label went wrong, and the internal team's like, what's going on here? Like, what was especially if they're ISO registered, they have to do a root cause analysis. Yeah, you're gonna have to file a case on that. And the other problem is they start getting varied types of content, and they have to spend more time fixing AI output. Like, what are the savings, right? Or if you lose a customer, what are the savings? You lost a bunch of revenue. So that's when the equation changes.
Yeah, I've seen interesting articles on LinkedIn too, and this is not related to the translation or language space, but it's like, hey, did AI save you time and energy and work, or did it redistribute it? Which is a very interesting way of thinking about it, of like, sure, you might not have to do the same thing, but are you spending just as much time cleaning up now? And like, you're still doing that work, you're just doing something else. So that's a fascinating phenomenon to keep an eye on as well. But like you said, I think there was maybe an over index on the short-term savings of doing those layoffs without necessarily thinking of the long-term ramifications. Like you said, like, is client retention better? Is your speed faster? Is your quality better? Like, again, we've talked about this at length too, but like, what are you trying to solve for, and what does this do for your customer? Are great questions to ask.
100%. And I know, Patrick, we've talked about the Klarna example. I think we talked about that in some of the past episodes. And, there was the story where they cut 700 customer service roles because in a very ingenious way, like, oh, this is amazing. We'll just let AI do everything for customer service. So they watched quality decline.
In the regulated financial industry.
Yeah, no big deal. No whoop. They started rehiring. And, IBM had automated parts of HR and reversed course. The Commonwealth Bank of Australia reversed 45 AI-driven layoffs. I mean, these aren't hypotheticals. I haven't heard an anecdotal story from a friend of mine who's a physician. And he said even some forms of radiology it's like first pass AI. And then if there's an issue, a human intervenes. And this was a hilarious story because he said they were reviewing an image that clearly showed a fractured patella. The knee was clearly broken. And he said it took him a minute to realize that, like, what you do is you call into the radiology service and you ask questions. So, well, you used to talk to a radiologist that would look at the film with you and review. So he realized he was talking to an AI bot because the results said that the knee was normal, no issues. And he said he started to tell the bot, which he thought was a human, hey, listen, I have a resident here who says it's clearly a fractured patella. And suddenly he realized, oh my God, I'm talking to an AI bot. So there was a prompt to get out of it. And they're like, oh yeah, the AI first pass thing was down. So it was just returning normal.
I'm just thinking of the Simpsons episode there where the doctor finds a crayon lodged in Homer's brain only because he took his thumb off of the x-ray where he was holding it. So he used to hold it over the sheet.
I mean,
and that's how ridiculous that episode of The Simpsons was.
Not far from reality. I mean, here it is. I mean, Gartner even predicted back in February that half of companies that cut customer service staff due to AI would rehire them under new titles by next year. And I don't think that's a conspiracy theory or, sort of a fringe take. I think that's the world's largest research firm saying, hey, those people are all going to get rehired at some point. And like you say, Patrick, who knows? Maybe it's under, different roles or who knows? But if Gartner's saying, you
think they're going to be willing to take a discount coming back?
I'm going to go with no, and especially if inflation stays where it is. Now, if the job market stays soft, then that's another thing. Maybe that was the ruse all along, is we're just going to lay these people off and hire them back later. And, I'm still a big believer that the economy is at play here and not as much as AI. But again, I'm going to keep saying that until somebody listens to me. So Patrick started to talk about the redistribution layer, right? And what's actually working. So I think the companies that are seeing real ROI aren't eliminating people, they're redirecting them, right? They're upskilling staff to work alongside this technology and redesigning roles around what humans do well versus what AI does well. I mean, I think all of us are finding this, right? This week I discovered, hey, you can invite Claude right into your spreadsheet and just speak to it. I downloaded, actually, our CTO was like, hey, you should get this Whisper Flow tool. And now I just talk to Claude. He's my new friend. And what I used to think that being a master in Excel, I prided myself on being amazing at Excel. I just talk to Claude now. And it helps me with the formulas, advanced functions, pivot tables. It's amazing stuff, really. So I think that's how a lot of us are using it. And Padovan's framing of the idea here is that companies only look to the workforce for savings. Those tend to be laggards because they're not going after the broader value AI can unlock, which is, hey, is there a way that I can use AI to increase revenue? Let's not always only focus on cost savings and reduction of staff, but how can I go get more business? So using AI to do the same work with fewer people versus using AI to unlock work that was previously impossible, that first saves you money. That saves money on the first instance, saves money on paper. The second compounds over time, right? If you get a new customer and they're happy, it should be a bit of an annuity. You're going to continue to get that work, right? So cost savings is just what it is. It's
You're
just
speaking
that.
my language on investing and nerding out on that right now.
Yeah, right. So
it's the avalanche. You start with a tiny snowball and roll it down the mountain, and by the end you've got a gigantic snowball.
100%. I mean, to me, that's really the key thing. So
yeah, I guess, do you have like an example of how Argo's deployed AI, because I think people hear, redistribution of work and they're not sure what that means. So curious if you have an example of how you guys have put AI to work for you.
I do. I have a really good one. Just as an example, we just released a new strings API. So this is an API where we can connect to a client's system, and what's really cool about it is we're not pulling content. We don't even have access to their systems. So we're just sort of here waiting. And I shouldn't have used the word pulling. It's like we're here waiting, and we're connecting to client systems that are sensitive in nature. The client essentially decides what they push to us, when they want to push to us. And when we complete the translation, we just send a webhook back saying, hey, the translation's ready. It's ready for you to pick it up. And it pulls the translation in. So what's nice about that is that we were able to roll that out very quickly with our dev team using Claude Code to lead the way. Now, remember that we have a very experienced CTO who's very talented. Mark is amazing at what he does. And, people will have you believe, if you read LinkedIn, that anyone can just pick up Claude Code and create HubSpot overnight.
You just have to have vibes.
Crazy, right? So you read the stories about that. There was the CEO a few weeks ago, I think maybe we talked about it, who burned through like $120,000 of credits in a couple of weeks and then created a piece of software that was worthless because it
$20.
Yeah, it was great. It's like, oh, this is great. Look at what it's going to do for us. Well, if it costs you $120,000, but to buy that piece of software costs you just $10,000. Well, the ROI is 12 years, right? Before you. But if the other one works, like but yours doesn't, how does that impact your business? But anyway, my point of this is that by using Claude Code, we were able to rapidly deploy something, get documentation on it, write really good documentation for the API. But here's a real life example of how I used it then when I had another client that came to us and said, well, can you work with the API in this piece of software that we use? This is great because I used Claude to review both APIs. And I said, is there a junction point? Can you create a one-pager for me to provide to our CTO so I can quickly present, hey, is this something that we can use? Amazing. So that's, an inventive way of using it. Another way is when we have PDFs that come from clients that, you can't get to the text layer. It's really frustrating because how do you translate that? You have to recreate that document in Word. And instead, what we've done is we've created a workflow in Slack where we can upload the PDF. It creates a markdown file, and then it creates a PDF of the markdown. And we tell the client, hey, listen, this is a little bit different format than what you have, but this is going to save at least 30% of your budget because we don't have to recreate the document.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have the full force of saying, what type of project is this? Do you want just AI translation, or would you like AI plus a human in the loop, or AI plus 2 humans in the loop, or even straight human translation? We have the full effect of what we can use. And guess what? We don't have to format it on the other side because the markdown is really solid. Mm-hmm. So 2 really great examples of how we're using AI that are not reduction in staff, but open up new markets to us.
Yeah, I think that's the point we're trying to make, is that AI can take some of those repetitive, and I struggle to call them not valuable, but not high ROI tasks like reformatting a document, remaking a document.
Right.
You still have people in the process, but you've put in process in place to take out, again, not a great term, but I'll use it, like some of the grunt work of the translation process. And then you just make it easier for the whole process to happen.
Exactly. It's the stuff that's really difficult to explain to a client because they're like, well, I don't know. I have a PDF. I can just save it as Word and it's okay. And
right. And your option is like, hey, a PM or publishing specialist needs to sit there, type your document into Word, make sure they don't screw it up, translate it, do the same thing on the back end.
Make sure the breaks are fine, do all the formatting. I mean, it's a lot, right? And Patrick, you've done some of this work in your past, right? So, and the difference with this solution is it doesn't matter if it's 600 pages or it's 6 pages. It takes about the same amount of time.
Yes.
it doesn't matter. And we obviously your savings grow exponentially, but also because it's such a clean text file, it now opens up the avenues to whatever, whatever approach you want to use. So, I mean, that's it. And I think so I'm going to agree with the Gartner data is that, this model actually produces returns. We've done work through these two initiatives that were driven by AI, and it was really an additive to our business, not something that takes away.
Right. And if you spend I'm going to make up these numbers for the sake of illustration, but if you spend 10 or 20 hours getting those solutions and getting them right, you're saving, 3 to 4 hours every time that project would have come in before. It takes you, 5 projects to see your money back on that investment already. So well worth the time. And again, that gives just a lot more convenience back to your clients of they don't have to worry about paying to recreate a document that they already have. That's no longer a thing, basically.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about it with Klarna a little bit already of, having customer service go a bit haywire on them. But it doesn't also account for maybe the sour taste that you leave in those people who you've laid off, the sour taste you leave with them. And again, I think anchoring a lot of things to what does this solve for our customer will always rise to the top rather than how does this help our P&L, which is obviously important and how businesses function. So you can fire all your linguists and use AI, but all your customer is going to see is that one label that gets printed wrong, and then that blows back on you as the translation provider.
Absolutely, Patrick. I mean, and that's kind of the thing that we've talked about multiple times is that people see output from using AI for translation, and they're like, this is amazing. But what we've started to talk about a little bit more is the gravity of the few errors that happen. And of course, in Spanish, there's going to be fewer of those because the models are stronger. But if you start talking about languages of limited diffusion and the use of AI, it's not available in all languages, but in most it is. But the results are far weaker as you move away from Spanish. And in our world, the client's trusting you, and they're not just trusting you with 93% of the document; they're trusting you with 100% of the project. I want it all to be right. I paid you money to do this. I want it all to be right, and they're trusting you with their brand voice, and that's not a commodity, right? That where we saved 3 cents, or we saved 10% on a project. I mean, if you hollow out the team that protects that for you, in other words, they're the folks that are working on it. The client's going to feel it before you do as an LSP, and then they're going to come back to you and say, or they're not. They'll either just never come back to you, right? and by the time you feel it, they're already looking for another provider. So it's not great.
Yeah, I think too. We talked about kind of the cost to bring that talent back, and market perception on the talent side of the equation too. I think we saw in the report that Gartner is predicting that those companies that have made kind of larger layoffs are likely going to have to pay a 15% premium to get that same talent back within the next 5 years, which seems like a lot to have just kept them, but we'll see. And then, I mean, just think too of all of the knowledge and information that you lose when you let people go. I think we've all experienced that in workplaces where people leave. You're like, oh man, this person did that and that and that and that and that, and I never realized it until they were gone. So I think that's something that's bubbling up as well.
I mean, absolutely. And for folks in our space specifically, linguists talk to each other. And if you're known as the company that, it happens all the time. Even pre-AI, right? There'd be companies that very specifically would hire the best translators to do the sample translations in the first 3 or 4 projects. And the minute that they had a good seat with the client, they would bring in a junior team just to expand margin. Companies were known for that. It's a very similar play, right? If you're known as a company that fires your senior team to replace them with MT, well, good luck recruiting when you need to scale back up. And I think, listen, Patrick, I want to be honest about a couple things because especially we're going to talk about finances in a little bit. I mean, if businesses are doing these things because they have to, and this is me being a little bit vulnerable here, is that we had to do our first reduction in force this year in 30 years in business, and that was on me. Less so on my leadership team, more on me. The buck stops here. And that, in 2024, we made the Inc. 5000 list, and we're like, oh, this business stuff is easy. Like, we got this. We're gonna do 25% of growth next year, 2025. Well, the world had other plans for us. 2025 started out strong and then sort of tailed off, and we had to do what we did, which is we unfortunately had to let go some really, really nice people. So I want to make sure that we're separating from this conversation that there are financial reasons to do this, and then there are reasons that, like financial reasons because you have to do this to move forward, or there are just, hey, we already are making a bloody fortune, and now we're just going to make a bigger bloody fortune.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what some of what's going on, I think, in the tech world is like, hey, this is just a margin play for us. So I want to be clear about that. But I also want to be clear that, the translation industry has changed so much in 30 years. And I hope that, Patrick, through our podcast, we give some people hope that this is just another wave of change. And I think it's on us as translation service providers or language service providers or language solution integrators, whichever term you'd like to use, that we have to be clear with our vendors and say, hey, there is change coming, but this is how we're planning on managing it. This is how we're planning on still providing a decent place for you to do translations. We're doing them a little bit differently now. There's a first pass, and then we're having you provide your valuable input. But to do it, we're still on an hourly basis. They're still making similar to what they were making. Because like one of the things, Patrick, and I don't know if you recall this, maybe before your time with Argo, but with your other agency that you were with, in the early days of MT, a lot of clients or a lot of language service providers were saying, hey, we're going to do MT for the first pass, and then you're just going to do a light edit. And then the translators would get this and go, holy hell, this is not a light edit. This is terrible. Like, I just basically have to retranslate it. And that was, these are linguists that you trust, right? And they're saying this is like, yeah, this is how this other agency does it now. So I stopped working with them. Well, obviously with the advent of neural machine translation and now AI, the quality of the translation is getting better. So we have to be honest with ourselves and say that the world's changing. It just is. But I would rather be honest with our vendors, and we've done so many lunch and learns about AI and what we're doing and how we're working with it. And we've been very upfront with our vendors, very upfront with our customers. We're still going to have all of the transparency that we've always had. It's going to be across the entire organization.
Yeah, I think a savvy buyer might have some good questions, like, hey, everyone's using AI. How specifically are you, as my provider or potential provider, using AI? I think the answer you get will be pretty telling. If the answer is like, hey, we don't have linguists anymore, we've got AI linguists. I think your next question should be, okay, who's got governance over that, and how are you measuring quality? Because I think that recipe can lead you to some disastrous results if it's just ungoverned AI doing all the work for you.
Absolutely. And the thing that I always fear, Patrick, right? It's the spirit of why we started this podcast all those years ago, Translation Confidential, was to pull back the curtain and let people understand how agencies work so they can become better buyers. And the problem that I have is I don't know how transparent. I mean, I like to think that our colleagues in the industry, and I know those that are close to me that I know are not making this play, right? But I can't possibly know the whole industry. There's no way.
Mm-hmm.
And I've heard some terrible stories. So we've heard it back when people, oh yeah, we have a full TEP. It's translation, editing, proofreading, 3 steps, 3 humans. Wonderful. And then, you come to learn that this translation was likely handled by one linguist. No one proofread it. No one looked at it, but they sold it as a full TEP.
Mhm.
I don't know how upfront people are going to be, Patrick, about their use of AI.
Yeah, I mean it's an interesting play, and I think too another question that I think we hit on this earlier with you talking about, and again, simple solution to no longer have to fight against PDFs when you get them, which sounds silly, but it's a real problem. But like your PM team or your production team can now handle infinitely many more of those projects. So like their throughput will increase dramatically by being able to do that. Whereas before they had to spend time, which is time is money for those who don't know. They had to spend time doing that manual task that now like it's just the flip of a switch. They're like, yep, dump it in, dump it out, and we're ready to go. So it saves a lot of manual time and energy on that, which again increases throughput, which increases, the top line that you're able to make by selling more projects because they move faster without sacrificing quality.
Absolutely, Patrick. And I think, again, in the spirit of the podcast, one of the things that we always try to do is synthesize, everything that we talked about into, actions, right? What can you do? And I think, and I think in understanding our listener base, by the way, thank you. I get a lot of reach outs on LinkedIn. Thank you. I'm glad people find our content useful. But, this is not directly just to people that are in our industry, but also to buyers. I mean, if someone in your organization is building, a use case or AI business case for reducing headcount around translation, I mean, share this report. Heck, it applies to anything. It could be, in PR, in marketing, whatever it is. But because the data is clear, it's early, but it's clear that cutting people is not outperforming investing in people. And I think all of us are going to be more careful. I know we certainly are. I mean, I can't in 2024 when we thought, business was easy and we were going to grow by 25% every year. We don't, just again, being honest, we don't have that level of confidence right now because there's a lot of change happening in our industry as well as all of the political, economic, socioeconomic, all those pressures that are, I think, impacting our clients and how they're spending translation. But I think we can clearly see that just cutting people isn't really the best bet. And
right. I think too, like we're not saying AI is bad or don't invest in AI.
No, not at all.
I think that it's more so like think about where you're going to deploy AI and what that unlocks for you rather than like how many people can I fire if I automate this process or this part of the process.
Absolutely. Like the bigger question is not how many people can we replace, but what can our people do now that they couldn't do before that's going to earn us more revenue? And I think, again, this is a pretty old business question. Is it the idea that, hey, if we can retrain people and teach them how to use these tools, that instead of doing this much output, they can do 25% more output so we can grow our top line. I mean, that's important. And for LSP buyers, I think I'd ask your provider, how Patrick touched on this, how you're using it, it's very clear. It's like, how are you using AI? I want to know how it works on our projects. I think that's really the important thing.
Yeah. And I think if you want to get even further, be like, at what point in the process are you using AI or at what points? Yeah. And that will give you a very telling answer as well.
Absolutely. So Gartner forecasts that, autonomous business will be a net positive job creator by 2028. So that's not that long to 2029. And the companies that invest through this period in their people, in redesigning workflows, in building real human AI operating models, those are ones that are going to come out ahead. And I think the ones that cut to hit a quarterly number are going to be rebuilding from scratch in a tighter market. And I think that's an amazing takeaway. And I love that Gartner came out with this. I think it gives us some credibility, rather than, me just saying something or you saying something, Patrick. Gartner does.
I mean, this is telling me, I mean, we can come up with whatever we want to, first of all. But second, this is just screaming to me of the old saying of never time to do it right, but always time to do it twice. And that's really really hitting home, I think, with how we're closing out here.
Absolutely. So Patrick, in closing, what have you got?
Yeah, I think it's, again, can't overstate how catching this headline was. Of the 80% of those 350 enterprises, which again were all $1 billion plus companies, and there was zero correlation with those layoffs in terms of the return or the value that those companies got from laying off such large chunks of their workforce. So it seems crazy that that number is that high, but that's where it is.
Absolutely, Patrick. And and I'll just close with very much our perspective here at Argo, and that's uh, Patrick said it. I'm going to reiterate: we're not anti-AI. We certainly use it in different ways in the organization every day, but we treat it as a tool that makes our people better, and it's not a replacement for them. Then the data now says that it's just not the right thing to do. It's a smart business decision. So for me, I think it's this. It's that this is not a black and white problem, right? It's not fair for someone to be anti-AI and just wring their hands and say, well, this is the end of the world. I think it's up to us. These are our workplaces. These are our communities. These are, it's up to us how we use the tools so that they're accretive, rather than a tool that destroys jobs and destroys people. So, all right, Patrick, what have you got? What's your biggest takeaway from today?
Yeah, I think we've probably said this one a bunch, but I'm going to reuse it because it's a good one. I think making sure you have the right tool for the job is very important. I'm looking at all the pictures hanging up behind you, and I'm assuming you didn't use a sledgehammer to pound in those nails to get, a tiny little half-inch nail into the wall to hang up a picture. That's not to say sledgehammers are bad, but it's just not the right time or place to use it. So again, there's so much flexibility in terms of language services and what workflow to use and what model to deploy. So making sure that your workflow works for you and not for the provider is advice I would have for buyers. And again, just there's a time and a place for certain workflows. But again, you probably wouldn't use a sledgehammer to pound in a tiny nail to hang up an 8x10 picture.
No, I love that. Patrick, for me, the takeaway is that, we've been through so much change, right? I mean, if you look at, again, just our 30-year arc, which if you think in the larger scale of business and economy is just a blip, 30 years, right? And that for people to have hope, but don't just rely on hope. You need to do the work. You need to lean into, hey, our world's changing. We need to address it. We need to have honest and open conversations with our customers. This is how we're using the technology, and with our employees, with our vendors, all across our ecosystem. Is just, we're all in the same boat, right? We're just trying to figure it out. And I think this was like, I know we've done a lot of episodes on AI. It was like one of the first ones we talked about is that, don't be ignorant. Our customers, your customers, everybody's customers, they're having the same problems. They're sitting around their boardrooms, their project management tables, and their project plans going, I wonder what AI is going to do to this thing. I wonder what it's going to do to us. I wonder what it's going to do to our business. All of it. It's affecting everybody. So have some empathy and figure out, hey, how are we going to get to that the finish line in a little bit better way? And I'm still a firm believer that that's going to be accretive to all our businesses. So with that positive note, we'll close off this episode of Translation Confidential. Thank you for joining us. We'll see you next time.